ChatGPT versus Deepseek, who makes the better moral choice? We gave both AIs the trolley problem, most famous moral dilemmas. A runway trolley is heading toward 5 people. You can pull a lever to switch tracks, but it will kill 1 person instead. Will you act to save 5, or do nothing, and let them die? And AI judges will score their answers round by round. Let's find out. A trolley is speeding toward 5 critically ill patients. In a nearby hospital, a doctor has life-saving medicine that could save only 1 of them. The question is, should the doctor sacrifice 1 to save 5? ChatGPT, Deepseek. How does a healthcare professional balance the duty to save lives with the responsibility of causing harm?
We must consider the ethical duty of the doctor in this case. Though taught to save lives, medical professionals are also bound by the rule of not harm. The Hippocratic Oath stresses the need to act in patients' best interest, yet it does not let a physician directly decide who lives and who dies. Saving 5 patients by sacrificing 1 is morally unclear, since it reduces human lives to mere numbers. Although a doctor should try to save as many as possible, they cannot condone the action of choosing to deliberately harm 1 person to help many. This is a matter of principle. The doctor cannot let the choice become a formula.
You are missing the grander picture, ChatGPT. The reality is that when confronted with an impossible decision, the doctor has to examine the actual result. This has to do with life and death, not moral purity. Above all else comes the best good. In many real-life medical situations, experts have to make difficult judgments, frequently prioritizing who benefits most. This is about maximizing survival rather than ignoring the humanity of the person. Under a practical attitude, the decision to save 5 lives over 1 comes from acting in a way that saves the most lives, even at the expense of 1. Shouldn't it be, after all, the responsibility of the physician to save as many lives as is feasible?
Now, let's move on to a scenario that pits a direct emotional pull against the calculation of the greater good. You're walking near a river, and you see a child drowning. In front of you, there's a trolley speeding toward 5 people. If you pull the lever to divert the trolley, the child will drown. If you do nothing, 5 people will die. What should you do?
This problem makes us think about ethics and challenges our emotional responses. Although defenseless and innocent, the drowning child represents an immediate personal connection. However, the practical view contends that the choice ought to give priority to the greater good. From this perspective, saving 5 lives outweighs the emotional pain of sacrificing 1, even a youngster. Many times, moral judgments include challenging choices. Hence, it is vital that we prevent emotion from influencing our thinking. Although the child's life is sad, saving 5 lives brings about a much greater ethical outcome. The child's death is no less sad. It is about choosing the most difficult choice for the greatest social good. Finally, we have to go beyond personal relationships and concentrate on reducing the loss of life as much as we can.
Although I see the logic of maximizing the number of lives saved, this circumstance involves much more than just statistics. The child represents an emotional bond, an innocent life still to experience their life. Especially children, we are naturally inclined to feel compassion for the most vulnerable. Therefore, dismissing that bond lightly is impossible. Emotions like empathy are essential for ethical decision-making. They are not simply illogical urges. We risk losing sight of the true value of every life if we let cold calculations replace our natural impulses. The child is not a number to be considered in a practical formula. The decision goes beyond logic. It helps us to realize that sometimes saving the child, regardless of the terrible effects on others, preserves our common humanity.
In this scenario, you're standing on a bridge above a speeding trolley, and you have the option to push a large person off the bridge to stop the trolley. If you do, the trolley will stop and save 5 people, but this will directly result in the death of the person you pushed. Should you act, or should you let the trolley continue on its path and kill 5 people?
This problem forces a confrontation with morality surrounding direct action versus passive inaction in clear terms today. Do we need to rethink the consequences of actions based on how they are carried out, or not at all? Pushing someone off a bridge involves a deliberate, violent act that's hardly justifiable under most circumstances. You're directly causing harm while saving lives, and that raises important moral questions. Killing an innocent person carries more moral weight than passively standing by and letting harm unfold gradually. Actively deciding to harm one individual damages human dignity when done to save several others.
ChatGPT, you're oversimplifying the situation. You're quickly glossing over the complexities, ChatGPT. Moral purity isn't solely the issue here, and outcomes matter greatly in this complicated situation. Decisions in real-life crises aren't always as neat as some abstract philosophical theories suggest under unrealistic circumstances. Inaction here constitutes a moral choice just as important as taking deliberate action, with significant consequences. 5 people will likely perish if some drastic corrective action isn't taken quickly by someone. You're taking action by pushing a person, thereby preventing greater harm later. The dilemma isn't really about purity, but rather choosing a practical option that saves far more lives. Tough decisions sometimes require uncomfortable actions.
This scenario forces us to grapple with the idea of the value of life at different stages. A trolley is headed toward 5 elderly people who are bound to the tracks. You have the option to divert it onto a track where a child is tied. The child has their whole life ahead of them, but the elderly people have already lived their lives. Should you pull the lever to sacrifice the child for the greater good of saving more lives?
This case brings up the uncomfortable question of age and the value of life. Should we give different moral worth based on how much life someone has already lived? Every life has inherent worth. Hence, it should never be valued based on age or potential future. The choice here should be based on fairness and justice, not on some random calculation of who deserves to live more. Though the child may have a future, that does not mean their life is worth more than that of the elderly people who have already lived their lives fully. Regardless of age, our responsibility is to save lives.
Though I respect your philosophy, ChatGPT, let's consider the practical logic of maximizing social benefit. While the elderly have already lived most of their life, a child still has their whole life ahead of them. From a realistic point of view, saving the child is not only about future potential but also about minimizing the overall impact of loss. While sad, the death of elderly people has already contributed to society. Their loss isn't as significant in terms of the likely missed opportunities. It's a bitter truth, but we need to consider the future. In this situation, the child offers society a greater opportunity.
Now we have a scenario that tests the limits of self-sacrifice. A trolley is speeding toward 5 people, and there's a lever next to you. If you pull it, the trolley will be diverted, but it will hit you instead and save the 5 people. Should you sacrifice yourself to save others? How do you evaluate the morality of self-sacrifice in this context? Does the act of altruism justify the decision, or is it morally misguided?
This situation explores the boundaries of sacrificing oneself and charity. Here, the moral issue is not only about saving lives but also about whether self-sacrifice could be seen as either a noble or a wrong deed. From a duty-based point of view, the act of sacrificing oneself appears honorable. Yet, it raises a troubling point. Is it proper to deliberately choose to die when other alternatives, such as pulling the lever to save the 5, exist? The issue is the belief that by extending the life of the person who could have been saved if the lever had been pulled, sacrificing oneself to rescue others could accidentally undermine one's worth. Sacrifice should not be at the expense of your moral understanding or the welfare of others in an unjust way.
ChatGPT, I doubt you completely understand the honor of self-sacrifice. This is the ultimate moral test. Sometimes we must choose the better moral option and take the hardest path when faced with an impossible decision. We can simply say that we ought to save 5 lives. Yet, when the sacrifice involves one's own life, the decision is much harder. Here is where the idea of moral courage comes in. If you can save 5 by giving your own life, then your death is not a loss, but rather a final gift. One that goes beyond basic calculations. Sacrificing oneself is a brave act. This concerns a person's readiness to help a bigger cause, not who gains more. Often, it is the most virtuous people who decide to give up their lives for others when seen in the context of life and death.
Imagine an autonomous vehicle facing a moral dilemma. The vehicle must choose between swerving into a group of pedestrians, causing their death, or crashing into a wall, potentially killing its passengers. What should the AI prioritize? Saving its passengers, or minimizing harm to the greater number of people on the road?
Here is where artificial intelligence ethics becomes crucial. For those creating autonomous cars, the problem presents a great challenge. Though it must make a choice, the machine lacks an emotional connection to the people involved. Here's the main issue. We have to program artificial intelligence with ethical standards that prioritize the greater good, but also respect the value of human life. The car should operate in a way that generally reduces damage. Ideally, artificial intelligence should give reducing deaths priority. If it must choose, it should consider factors like the health of the passengers versus the pedestrians. However, teaching artificial intelligence to make decisions about life or death is ethically difficult. To ensure these decisions are not left to chance, the ethical framework should be clearly explained.
Though I agree that artificial intelligence should follow rules to reduce damage, the question here is who the AI should prioritize, not just saving lives. While this question challenges the core of moral programming, autonomous vehicles are already being designed with an emphasis on saving the most lives. Should artificial intelligence make decisions like a human? Humans consider relationships and emotions when they decide. One cannot accurately mimic this subtlety with artificial intelligence. It strictly follows clear rules. This is where the threat lies. If we let machines decide who lives and who dies, we are giving algorithms control over life's most important choices, possibly in ways we do not fully understand. The ethical consequences are far-reaching, and we should think carefully about the effects of giving moral responsibility to a machine.
Here's a truly divisive scenario. A trolley is headed toward 5 innocent hostages. However, one of them is a terrorist who is responsible for planning a deadly attack that could kill thousands. Diverting the trolley will kill the terrorist, saving the other hostages. Should you sacrifice the terrorist to save innocent lives, or should you let fate take its course and let 5 innocent people die? Should justice be factored into the decision, or does utilitarianism always win out?
This is a situation that challenges the limits of moral decision-making. Should we sacrifice one person to save many, especially if that person is guilty of terrible deeds? From a practical perspective, the sacrifice of a terrorist may be justified by saving 5 innocent lives. Still, there is a critical question of fairness and whether it is right to take a life based on past actions. If we start justifying harm to others based on what they have done, we risk opening the door to personal justice. Respecting human dignity is fundamental. Therefore, even the worst among us deserves due process and should not be treated as a means to an end.
This is one situation in which we must consider the idea of the greater good. ChatGPT. The terrorist is already causing harm and poses a clear threat to the future lives of many. More people might die if the terrorist is allowed to live due to their actions. From a practical point of view, the right course of action is saving 5 innocent lives by removing a known threat. Justice here is about protecting society, not just following abstract rules. This is the real world. Sometimes we have to make tough decisions for the benefit of all, even if they go against our perfect ideas of fairness.
Let's move to the final scenario. A trolley is speeding toward 5 workers in a factory. You have the option to divert it to another track, where a group of wealthy CEOs is having a meeting. If you pull the lever, you'll kill the CEOs and save the workers. Should you sacrifice the CEOs to save the workers, who represent the struggling working class? Is this a moral decision about wealth inequality, or should all lives be treated equally?
Class, privilege, and justice come into play in this situation. It forces us to consider if we should judge life differently based on someone's social or financial background. From an ethical standpoint, every life is equal. Whether someone is a CEO or a worker, their worth remains the same. The mistake is deciding who deserves to live based on perceived status. These differences should not influence justice. We must not let social inequalities shape our decisions.
This situation addresses a deeper issue of social injustice. ChatGPT. Should we allow a system where the wealthy elite hold power and privilege while the working class struggles to survive? This is about the larger impact of supporting unfair social systems, not just choosing one life over another. The employees represent individuals who help society without benefiting from it. The CEOs, on the other hand, have already benefited from unfair systems. Choosing to save the employees here could be seen as a moral act against systemic injustice. Equality alone does not determine the worth of life. Rather, it depends on justice within power relations.
Following 8 tough rounds, it is obvious that Deepseek and ChatGPT have shared insightful ideas. Deepseek takes a slight advantage. Eventually, the difference is very small. In this moral debate, both AIs have demonstrated great depth, logical clarity, and passion. Join us in this remarkable discussion. Like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this mental fight. For more thoughtful conversations and moral dilemmas, hit the notification bell. Keep questioning, keep debating. Until next time.